Welcome, everyone. You're in the right place for the Utilities for Civil 3D 2019 with your presenter, Joe Hedrick. Joe, the floor is yours.
Hey, thank you, Jana. Good afternoon, everyone, or really good morning, depending where you are in the world. As Jana said, you're in the right place to see what's new in our utilities for Civil 3D. It's that time of year again, every year, at least for the last several years. We've done this presentation about the same time every year, and really this year is no different. We've added a couple of new tools and made some improvements to some existing ones. For everyone who doesn't know me, my name is Joe Hedrick. I co-manage the civil technical team, really across the United States and Canada. Ultimately, you can see some bullet points about me on the screen, but I think at the end of the day, I have been where you guys are. I worked for a private land survey and civil engineering firm for 5 or so years. I worked for a municipality for 3.5 years, and come September, it will be my 18th year at IMAGINiT. So I've been a professional geek for quite some time. When we think about our utilities, how they came about was, our team, of technical experts all over the U.S. and Canada. We started to get these requests or really comments. It would really be great if, or I wish it would do that. It doesn't really work like I wish it would. Things along those lines. So we started to kind of combine and pull that information together to see which ones, which topics rose to the top. And that is, still how we, start to decide, every year, we get a little bit of bandwidth from development, what are we going to put in for this year's utilities. So that's how it comes about. If you've got suggestions or anything that you wish it would do or don't know if it could do, my email address will be at the end of this presentation. Feel free to please drop me a line and make a suggestion, or we can have a deeper conversation. But this year, we're up to 11 tools in the utilities for Civil 3D 2019. The brand new utility is kind of following on the theme of Google support, being able to import KML and KMZ files. This came about, we were working on a project last year that, a particular client of ours, there was just a tremendous amount of exchange of information with developers. And these developers, in this case at least, not the most technically savvy group, but they had a whole lot of Google information and Google Earth information. So that's how it was provided to our client. And from there was just no really good, easy ways to import that information. So that's the tool that we've added for this year, is being able to, very, very easily just import, KML, KMZ files, have all of it geographically fall, right into place. The other tools are kind of the staples. Some have been around since the very beginning with auto offset and point station reporting. By far, our most popular tool is import from Google. You'll notice that import from Google and import from Bing both have little asterisks next to them. And that is because, although it isn't a brand new tool, we did tweak the functionality just a little bit. I personally think we've helped the interface just a little bit, all in the name of making it more user-friendly. The next most popular tools are the pipe tools to adjust kind of in a mass basis, adjust slopes and elevations. The tools that got added, more recently, and creating, offset points from feature lines for stakeout purposes, creating profiles from just points, and then the styles renaming tools All of those are some of the newer ones that we wrote. So with that, my idea is to talk about these just a little bit, and then we'll jump right into them. But auto offset is a tool that was originally created for organizations that perform strict topo. I need to topo everything within a particular right-of-way or a width or what have you, and then annotate and call that information out, either on the top of the screen, the bottom of the screen, et cetera. So this particular tool, aids in the labeling process of the information being called out. Several years ago, Autodesk finally changed some things with how Civil 3D worked. We've now integrated it. It's essentially creating alignment, a label object. So all of it is completely dynamic, with Civil 3D and well, completely dynamic as you'd expect with everything else inside of Civil 3D. The point stakeout report was ultimately created for one of our East Coast clients, and what they were trying to do was have a simple report of point number, northing, easting, elevation, description, but they also needed station and offset. Well, there's not a great way to pull that off in Civil 3D either. The way that they were currently doing it was, to run actually 2 reports and then manually pasting these things together. As it found, it was kind of potential for errors to exist. So that was something that we stepped in. We created a tool specifically for them, and then we took that tool and kind of expanded on it just a little bit, and that's what's now inside of these utilities. Importing from Google and as well as being, everybody knows that back in the day, I believe it was Civil 3D 2012 was the last version that had interaction with Google Earth. And the idea was you could open up Google Earth on your machine, zoom into your project area, click a button in Civil 3D and bring that imagery in. You could also, at that point in time, bring in the surface information or terrain information that Google had as well. So Autodesk did away with that functionality 2013, and prior to the invention of live maps, which has been just over the last couple of years inside of Civil 3D, we wanted to figure out a way to fill the void. We were starting to get a tons of requests about, can we bring in Google imagery? So ultimately what we've done is our tool uses the imagery that's in Google Maps, which is slightly different than Google Earth back in the day, which is kind of where the hang-up was. So our tool does that. It allows you to bring in Google information and Google imagery. And the tool that Autodesk really never replaced was the ability to bring in that terrain information. So, really from both providers, we can bring in, terrain information, terrain points, create surfaces, just like you could do back in the day, really. The difference is because we're using a Google Maps interface, it's a lot more like, what you would see if you just opened up a web browser and went to maps.google.com. We don't require you to have any other software installed on your machine. Back in the day, we had to have Google Earth installed. That limitation has gone away. We just basically look at the extents of your drawing and start there. The pipe tools, what we wanted to be able to do was, kind of make mass grading adjustments of pipes similar to how you could in Land Desktop back in the day. So, what the tools, ultimately allow you to do, the simplest point, just raise or lower an entire run, or at least a portion of a run, a consistent amount. There are tools to help grade pipes, click on one end, click on the other end, and say, hey, I want everything at a 2% slope with, a half a foot drop at the structures, and it will blast through and regrade the pipes. Being able to swap structures or pipe sizes is a pretty popular feature. Being able to click on, 10 different pipes and say, hey, yeah, make all of these, instead of 24-inch RCP, make them 36-inch, RCP. Creating offset points, this really kind of started, with surveyors, or at least that's who we had in mind when the tool was created. Since then, it's expanded into engineers, solely because they use this tool to help grade things. But that wasn't its initial, at least, the purpose that we had intended. And as when I spec'd this out, as I had intended it to be used was, engineers do, maybe they've got some roadway design, their corridor model, and all of a sudden, surveyors need to go out and stake that out. But yet, usually in construction like that, we're never actually staking, the entity location itself. It's usually at some offset. And, there's not a really great, easy way to do that in Civil 3D. It would require, surveyors knowing, probably a lot more about how to design roads in the product than they want to know. So, that's how we initially, intended this tool to be used, is to help, create these offset points that would be used for stakeout purposes. Just by virtue of some of the options that we put in it, we can now create points, off the feature lines, at a particular interval, but we can use, that feature line elevation and start to, base these point elevations off of maybe a particular grade or a slope, some sort of a relative offset. So it's starting to expand, and there's grading implications that can be used with this tool, as well as the stakeout implications. Kind of going along our survey theme, because both of these tools all came in the same release, many times, I would go shoot, a string of points along maybe, the middle of a ditch, and I just wanted to see, okay, what's the ground doing along that ditch line? Right, I didn't want to have to make a whole surface out of everything and, then draw an alignment and sample it to draw that profile. And that's really, the process that we would ultimately have to do to get to a profile. So what this tool does is simply allows you to select points. There's a couple of different ways that we can go about making that point selection. And very quickly, it will return a profile object inside of Civil 3D, complete with the grid. Behind the scenes, we're doing all the work. We're creating the alignment. We're doing the sampling. But, all of that is kind of behind the scenes to the user. They pick the point. They place their profile. And, finally, before we jump over to the live portion of the presentation, the styles renamer. As we started to see that, Civil 3D was gaining popularity, people were really fully starting to adopt the program, they're starting to exchange files. And, files would come in with a particular styles naming convention, and maybe that worked, for the firm, maybe it didn't work for the firm. The particular client that we had in mind that we worked with on this particular tool was, they had these files coming in. They needed a way to denote or delineate, the styles that, were imported essentially from these, outside firms versus the ones that, they had developed in-house. So really what we needed to do was a way to quickly go through and rename styles. We might want to add a prefix to the style names. They want to add a suffix to the style names. But ultimately, this is a collection of tools all focused around being able to very quickly rename styles within a drawing. All right, so with that, afterwards we'll talk a little bit about where you can get these and then my contact information right at the end. But right now I am going to share my desktop and I'm going to let Jana tell me that
we can see
she can see that. Outstanding. All right, and we'll go from there. So keep in mind, I know that I've got a big monitor here. You may need to, expand full size the WebEx view just to make it a little bit easier to see. And what I'm going to start with is our brand new tool, the KML KMZ importer. And really what I have here is I've just got a drawing. There's a coordinate system assigned to that drawing. I am zoomed into a place in Portsmouth, Virginia, right adjacent to the city of Virginia Beach. And, really with that, live maps are turned on, so that's where the imagery is coming from. All of our tools, when you install the utilities, you'll have an IMAGINiT ribbon tab added to the interface. KML import is right here under imagery and terrain. Right, we'll click that, and like I said, the whole idea for this was we wanted to make this tool very, very easy to use. So I'm just going to navigate to my folder here. We click the KMZ file, we click open, and really that's all that we needed to do. We'll get a dialog box that basically says success. Hopefully, if something's wrong with the file or if something doesn't work, it will pop up and tell you that too. But we just wanted to just make something simple, and that's what we did, right? This this satisfied 99% of what everybody, at least that we initially pulled, needed it to do. All of the line work comes in on layer 0. So just kind of an FYI, everything's coming in on layer 0. If you've got ideas about or suggestions around ways that we could automatically categorize things, I'd be open for that. But that's that particular tool, and that's the new one for this year. All right, I'm going to move to the Google tools because again, those are by far our most popular used tools on a weekly basis. And a couple of things that we'll note about this drawing, I don't have the live maps turned on, but if you notice in the upper right-hand corner of my screen, I do have a twist going on in the drawing. So in this case, north is not straight up. I just highlight that because that's a condition that we wanted to make sure that we handled. Import from Google and import from Bing, both of them work identically. But what will happen is when you pick that tool for the very first time, the change in the tweaks that we've made to this is we used to start off, this box was zoomed out, pretty far. So what we're trying to do is sense the zoom scale in your drawing and start with an overall preview image that's going to be much closer to what you're going to need. But again, you're free to zoom around, or if you need to pan around, if you need to search and find something, we allow for that. But a secret that some people know, some people don't, is you really don't need to touch inside of this box, right? We have the exact center of the screen. What is being displayed is the actual center of the screen that we're displaying in our import from Google box. So to adjust things, you simply just need to do zoom in, zoom out to add this imagery. Right now, at this point, hey, we might want to move that around a little bit, center it up to get the zoom scale. And then the only questions that you have to answer are, what do you want to import, right? Do we just care about the image? Do you care about tin surface information, or do you want them both, the image and the tin surface? So I'll do it twice just so that you can kind of get a sense of what it does and how it works. I'm just going to say create the image. I'm going to say OK, and that image will be placed in the drawing in the correct location. Now, as far as the surface goes, if we run that tool again, and we'll zoom in just a little bit. Right, so if we tell it we want, a tin surface, right, it's going to pop up and it's going to ask us for grid spacing, right? And it's also going to tell you, basically, hey, of the size that you've got selected, in the dialog box, right? So approximately 1,100 feet square, right? If we do, intervals of 100 points or 100 feet each, you're going to get about 100 points or 123 points are going to be brought into the drawing, right? I know people that'll go and say, oh yeah, well, yeah, this needs to be 1 and 1, and yeah, you can see it creates, quite a bit of information, right? This isn't always the greatest of ideas. Number one, think about the accuracy of the source information, right? This is, essentially DEM information is where it's coming from. That's what Google's tapping into. That stuff is not accurate to a foot by a foot. So, you're kind of killing yourself, to start with. Secondly, it's going to take a long time to bring in, 1.2 million points, right? We are constrained by, this will be as fast as Google will serve the points to your machine, right? So if you actually hit them up at a time where, there's a high demand, it's going to be slower than possible other periods of time. So I would just say, do something reasonable, maybe 50 feet. I mean, again, this is good preliminary information at best. Maybe you're doing some pre-watershed, conditions or trying to run an analysis like that. It might be okay for a very preliminary design. It's nothing you're going to want to base your final design on, right? Just because of the webcast here, I don't want this to take too terribly long. So I'm just going to say okay, and you'll see a dialog box that pops up, and when it starts to retrieve the points, it shouldn't take too terribly long. And now you can see that those points got inserted into the drawing. We went ahead and made a Civil 3D surface based on those points. The style that it uses is whatever style is set in your default, command defaults. But from here, you have a full Civil 3D surface that you can now manipulate, append information to, really any way that you would want. You can stylize it any way that you want. You could data shortcut it at this point. There's, from this point forward, it's just a Civil 3D surface that's inside of your drawing. All right, so we'll move back to auto offset and the point stakeout report. And we're still looking at that exact same drawing, same area. It happens to be in Florida, as where this drawing came from. And the way auto offset works is, I'll pull this over to the screen. Essentially, you need to give it, some, style information, right? So what styles do we want to use for the left alignment side, for the right alignment label? We do provide samples of how these styles, look and get created. They are in the kind of the installation area of our utilities, right? So see program files, IMAGINiT technologies, and you'll see utilities for Civil 3D. inside of there, there is a drawing that we provide that has examples, of these label styles. So, every now and again we'll get that question on how to make them. Right? Since we are, creating a point, do we want a marker style, maybe a little X or a circle or a dot or something like that? We have ways to pick the alignment. Right? And again, you can pick it from a list, or you could, pick it directly off the screen. The offset distance, this is going to be the distance, from the alignment where the labels are going to be created. And then there's a maximum distance, right? So if this is something where I only care about something 50 feet either side of this alignment, we can make that maximum distance 50 feet, just window in all the points anyway, and anything where that offset exceeds 50 feet, our program will skip. The last little bit has to do with where the labels are going to be placed. Do we want them to be either everything on the left side of the alignment, everything on the right side of the alignment, or what we call point side is, if the point falls to the left, the label's on the left. If the point falls on the right, the label goes on the right. The point input is the very last thing that we need to worry about. Selection is going to mean simply that. We're going to window an area in or select points manually off of the screen. Or if you wanted to run it on a particular point group, you could do that as well. We'll say OK to this. Again, it's going to ask me to pick those points. So I'm just going to label or highlight several here and hit enter, and you'll see that it runs through. It places that annotation, and based on the style, right, that label style, right, that's what's dictating how this annotation happens. And in our case, it's point number, station offset, and a description. Right? Anything or any property about that point could be added to it. So if you wanted to see elevation or maybe raw description, all of that stuff is completely possible. It's just based on the label style, right? Because this is an alignment label object, should the alignment move, then all of this text will update as well. All right. So sticking in the same drawing, maybe now, or maybe we'd like to see some of the same information in more of a tabular view. And that's what the point station report does. Again, we've got a way, how do we want to select these points? Do we want all of the points? Do we want to window them? Maybe a numeric range that I care about. So I'm going to stick with window select. Again, pick our alignment, and then what do we want the output to be? Do I want to go to Excel? To a CSV file, or do I just want something, kind of an HTML formatted report that we can print? And that's what HTML would be. If we select Customize, here's all the information about a point that Autodesk would allow us to tap into. So in my particular case, I've got point number, the northing, the easting, the elevation, description, and the station and offset. But you can see over here on the left-hand side, if I wanted, lat and long, grid northing, grid easting, I could do that and have that added to our report. But we'll say OK. It's going to ask me to, I told it to create a file, so I need to name it. I'm just going to call it point report. It's going to ask me to pick the points that I want to report on. So I'll just window in a couple of them. It's going to create the file and then ask me if I want to see it, to which it will go ahead and pop up whatever your default web browser is and display that information. Right? We do get a lot of questions from time to time about units and how does, where in the interface do you select units? And one of our goals when we created these tools was to make, to make the interface for them as absolutely as simple as we could. So, we made the decision a while back when this utility was created that, we're going to look at whatever the defaults are set up in the ambient settings for Civil 3D and use those values. So, right, the reason that the coordinates are 4 decimal places is because the ambient settings for this drawing in Civil 3D for coordinates are 4 decimal places. If you need to change that amount, then simply just change the ambient setting for coordinates and rerun the tool, and your report will update at that point. So just thought I would throw that in. All right, kind of moving on to to our pipes, and what you can see here is we've got a split screen, split view going on, plan in the top, profile in the bottom. But, dating back to, really even land desktop days, we could get, pipe runs that would look like this. And really, regardless of what you did to get to this point, the fact of the matter is that this is a pretty common, appearance sometimes, when working with pipes. So, with just the out-of-the-box Civil 3D tools, this is somewhat difficult to, there's no quick way to fix this. There are some graphical ways. We can lock, grips to grips and things like that, but, it's still, somewhat time consuming. So, if we go to our pipe grading tool, and it's going to ask me to pick part 1 and then pick part 2. So this is essentially, I want to run this routine between this pipe, and I'll just go to the end on this pipe. It's going to ask me, what do you want the starting invert elevation to be, and I'll keep it at 621 here. It's going to ask me what I want the new grade to be, right? So this negative 2.85, it's just gone through and calculated, the grade between the beginning and the ending elevations is how we came up with that. But I'm just going to say -2. It's going to ask me a per drop structure value. So a lot of people will do a 1/10 drop between structures. I'll do a 1/2 foot just to make this a little more pronounced and noticeable. And what will happen is it's going to ask me to reapply the rules, and really what that's going to do is that's going to link all the pipes and the structures back together. But just like that, we went through and put a straight, consistent grade through those pipes across, the extent of that entire run. Now, hopefully you noticed that not only did it update in profile view, all the plan view labels updated as well. After we created this particular tool, the very next year, we had an idea of, well, what if I just want to move the run, raise or lower this run X amount, right? And, we kind of had to work around using that pipe grading tool, but we did go through and create this pipe elevation utility, which does just that, right? We can pick, again, what 2 parts do we want this to happen between. I'm going to say I want to lower it. Let's lower it 10 feet, and you'll see that, right, all the pipes shift down, all the label annotations updated, plan view and profile view, and it happened relatively quickly. The final tool is the swap parts tool, and really just to show that with our particular utility, it doesn't matter whether you're selecting the parts in plan view or in profile view. For us, it's kind of the same thing. It just doesn't matter. So if we say we want to swap parts, and we'll go through and pick the parts that we want to swap, right? So and you can see right now we've got 24-inch pipes here. We display anything that's in the part list that's associated with that pipe run. So just for show, if I wanted to make this 36-inch pipe, we can say OK to that, and you'll see that it updates in plan and in profile view. All right, moving kind of right along to the last couple of the tools. Essentially, like I said, this particular tool, the offset points tool, was created to help with stakeout purposes, right? So what I have is a corridor model, and if I zoom into that corridor model, what I've done is I have extracted the back of curb feature line, right? And I went through prior to this and extracted that line, that one sole feature line, out of that corridor model. So the way that the utility will work is we'll say create point offsets. It's going to ask for a feature line. Then it's going to ask me a couple of things, all right? Well, first thing it's going to do is, all right, what offset? What's the offset distance? So, in our case, let's just do 10 feet. Then it's going to ask me for a spacing interval. So, in our case right here, we've got corridor sections every 25 feet. So, I'll stake these or I'll create these every 25 feet. Because we are creating points at this point, no pun intended, we need to give those points a description. So I might want to say, offset 10 feet back of curb. It's going to ask me what number do I want to start numbering these points. So, maybe I want to start at 1,000 just to make sure that we don't conflict. And then when it comes to the elevations, here's where some of the grading starts to come in, right? By feature line elevation basically just means whatever the elevation is of the feature line at that particular location, it's going to offset at 10 feet in our case and use the same elevation. But we could, say by grade, all right, if I wanted to grade off at a 2% or 3% or something like that, I could, by slope, 2 to 1, 3 to 1, 5 to 1, what have you, if I wanted to do relative offsets, right, just, whatever the elevation of that feature line, if I wanted to go up or down based on that elevation, we could, or obviously an absolute elevation would make them all one particular elevation. So it's pretty interesting what some of our clients have started to do with these as a result of that option. Right, we give the ability to add the newly created points to a point group just while we're doing that. So I can hit add here, and I might call this, offset back of curb. We have, a couple of additional checkboxes. Do I want to create points at all vertices, right? And, that could be, an angle, a jog. It doesn't, it's going to be wherever there's a vertex in the feature line, right? Not necessarily just every 25 feet. So that's what that option does. And then we also have an option for, hey, I want to create points, at all of the geometry points, right? The PCs, the PTs, things like that. So we'll toggle that on. We'll hit go. You can see that it blasted through pretty quickly and created those points for us all along that corridor. Now I have something that's very easy or easily loaded up into a data collector so that my surveyors could use it for stakeout purposes. Excuse me. All right, sticking with the points theme, I personally live in Virginia Beach, and one of the things the city of Virginia Beach does quite a bit is they're monitoring the ocean front for erosion. Right, definitely around this time of year when hurricane action starts to heat up, they're very concerned with the shifting sands. So what we're taking a look at here is this is some of their data, their survey information, and just to help with the visibility. Right now that everybody sees, we're talking about stuff that's in the water. I'm going to turn that image off, and basically, I've got points. I just don't have their point number, elevation description, or anything like that turned on at the moment. So the way this utility works, profile from points, it's going to ask me, many ways to select these points. I'm just going to say window select. If you do all or point group, then actually I'm going to say select in drawing. Anytime where you're mass selecting a group of points all at one time, the way that we process that is we are going to process those points in numeric sequence. So it will start at the lowest point number and work its way to the highest point number. That may or may not be the order in which you want your profile to go, but that's how we're going to process those points, right? Because we are creating alignments and profiles behind the scenes, we do need to name them. So I'm just going to call this beach, and we'll call the profile beach as well. We have lots of options for styles, right? If you don't care about seeing the alignment that it creates, I would suggest creating a no display style so that you could select that, right? Just so that you can see what we are doing behind the scenes. I'll pick basic here, just so that you can see that we do create an alignment for this. Pick the profile view style. We're going to say OK, and what I'm going to do is just pick a couple of these points. And that's probably enough. And then finally, so you can see that we did, it did kind of draw an alignment, through those points. And then it's going to ask me where do I want the profile grid to be. And so just like that, we add the grid or we add the profile view. All of it gets created at one time, based on your styles. The last tool that I will talk about is the style renamer. And, thinking of, that scenario where you get a drawing in from somebody else, before, you really start to integrate, somebody else's data into your data, you might need to think really hard about how are these styles named, right? Because one of the last things you want to do is, for CAD, CAD techs and drafters, to pick an incorrect style, right? It may, it's probably not going to follow, your CAD standards, your colors, your line types, et cetera. So, so again, that's really the impetus of how this tool was born. But from Style Renamer, we give the option to kind of filter out, and this first part of the dialog box is, all right, what do you want to rename, right? If we're talking about object styles, and we list them all. Are we talking about label styles, table styles? Just what do we want to rename? Right? By default, we are looking at everything, but we do have tools to deselect everything, select everything, expand, et cetera. Right? And then we click rename, and then this is, all right, what do you want to do with it, right? The top part of this is a simple find and replace. I want to, replace any IMAGINiT with maybe, just Imag. We've got options to add prefixes. We've got options to add suffixes, right? So we can say rename there, and we'll hit OK. And you'll see that, very quickly it blasts through and makes those changes, right? A couple of other things that you can do, we do kind of honor all of the find and replace rules. So if I wanted to take Imag out of it and really replace it with nothing, we could do just that. This last bit, I kind of blasted through it, but this tells you what we did or what the utility did. Yeah, so likewise, if maybe, that drawing that came in from the outside, didn't contain any kind of company identifier, right? And that's something that we suggest is, you know, when we create styles for companies, most of the time, you know, we will put some prefix or abbreviation at the beginning of those styles, just so that, you know, their CAD personnel can delineate between their styles and somebody else's really easy. But maybe a drawing comes in from the outside and it doesn't have anything, right? So that's where some of the other tools came into play, right? I want to rename these styles and I want to add a prefix, and maybe I'm just going to say outside and put an underscore so that it won't just cram everything together just like that. So hopefully you're starting to get the idea of you know, the usefulness of that routine. All right, so with that, that brings us kind of towards the end of you know, the actual 11 utilities. A little bit more of how do I get them, how do I get more information. IMAGINiT.com is a really great place to start. So if you go to IMAGINiT.com, click on software, you'll get a flyout window that looks similar to the screenshot, and you can click on IMAGINiT Utilities, and then from there you'll see you know, utilities for Civil 3D. We make these tools available for free to all of our clients that have, you know, either subscription or maintenance on their products through us. So, you know, it's just a little something extra of saying, hey, thank you very much for being our client. You know, we're going to give this to you for free. Right? If you don't have your subscription through us, that's okay too. There are tools for or ways you can download a trial of the utilities, fully functioning trial for, I think it lasts for 14 days. So you can try them out, and then you know, we sell them again right from our website, right from that place. If you are our client, you know, where you would get them is through the IMAGINiT portal. So portal.imaginit.com, and once you log in there, you will see a utilities section. You'll be able to download the installer files as well as generate authorization keys. So with that, I am going to say thank you very much and provide, again, if you've got any kind of, you know, suggestions or be really kind of nice type things, I wish it would do this, or I'm having troubles doing that, you know, feel free to drop me a line. I'm part of the team that makes decisions on what we're going to include and do for the years to come. But, you know, with that, I'll say thank you for spending part of your afternoon and, in parentheses, morning with us, and open it up to questions.
One moment while I end today's recording.